You're listening to the Dream Team Roundtable on Design and Focus, a new multimedia platform serving CID. CID, Creative, Innovation, Design. On the Dream Team Roundtable, participants are presented with a problem and have to try to solve it using design thinking or creative problem-solving techniques. Can we do it? You can always watch us try. Hi, and welcome to the Dream Team Roundtable on Design and Focus. Today we'll be addressing sustainability in fashion and the role of design. I'm joined by 7 people who will be contributing their skills and knowledge to address the topic. Hi guys, can you start by introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your background, starting with Vera?
Hi all, my name is Vera. My official title now, I'm a UX UI designer, but on the background, I'm much more. I have a BA in business administration. I was working as business analyst for 5 years in Moscow. And then gradually I entered the UX UI world after finishing Design Academy in Poland here in the Netherlands. My interest is sustainability, besides just general curiosity and trying to implement all the sustainable practice in my daily routine. I was working as a graphic designer in circular economy. Probably you know this is a non-profit. Sorry, I'm also. So this is non-profit organization based in Amsterdam, and I was working there for more than a year in the city department, but it was not really about the circular economy. I was working in a team that was implementing the donut economy, and maybe you also know about it. So we were closely working with the founder of this theory, and we're trying to create workshop for the city representative of Amsterdam, Sydney, and several cities in America. So I was basically responsible for design thinking, implementing design thinking approach to workshops that we were basically creating to help the cities to implement donut economy approach. So this is my small background, and I hope my knowledge in this area will contribute to this session, of course.
Sounds great.
Interesting.
Indeed, sounds great. And the donut economy, that's very good. My name is Jeroen. I am an entrepreneur at the moment, running my own business and operating as a freelancer, getting on board for a project as an experience design lead or creative consultant. I like to specialize myself in a field that I call connected experience design, that contains Internet of Things applications, a field that I've been sort of falling in love with over a longer time now, starting in 2017, being part of the team introducing a new network technology. And since that moment, I've seen all these inventors creating new applications, which just inspires me a lot. What I have with sustainability is that I am more and more afraid that we're too late. And I'm not seeing in the places where I go or where I work the attention or the attention that it should have.
Yeah.
Agree.
I couldn't agree more on the last part of your story. I'm Linda van der Zwan, a UX designer, and since last week I'm also putting UX strategist in my signature. and a service designer, and I'm working for Ivo Rechtspraak, and that's the Dutch organization that does everything that has to do with justice, and we're making the IT solutions. And I'm mostly focused on customer journey experience designing, omni-channel, etc., etc. And for me, it's also really important to see that everything connects in the right way. Every application that we are building, instead of having it in their own space, connecting all the things that we do together to create a best experience possible. And sustainability for me is also important just for my personal interest. And I also agree that I think we are too late and we have to have a crisis approach instead of everything that we're doing now, which leads to nothing. Yeah, that's it for me, I think.
Mike Price. My background is IT. I worked for a large global sports retailer for 26 years, being responsible for the European and Asia IT, and then later being responsible for the supply chain, as well as AI, robotics, and Internet of Things. So, Jeroen, you and I can have some interesting conversations there. At the moment, I work as a consultant from an IT and sustainability perspective, and in the last 18 months have really delved into sustainability and the challenges that it has in the fashion environment from where I grew up. And we have missed the 1.5. We'll be lucky if we make 2 degrees in the next 10 years. And I hope out of this conversation, we can come to some sort of first steps, because I seriously believe that design is the beginning of the sustainability when it comes to products and fashion. And if we don't do it right there, then we're going to have a lot of difficulty getting to the next stage. So for now, I am trying to change my lifestyle to become sustainable. And I believe that we all have 2 of the most powerful weapons in our arsenal to get sustainability moving. And one of them is we can vote with our wallet. So you can determine what you're going to buy and where you're going to do it, and that'll be sustainable. And if 10% of the population do it, then the next 10 will move twice as quickly. And if 20% of the population does it, then the next 20% will do it twice as quickly as that. So we all have the potential to do it. The other is that we're all allowed to vote, because everyone here is older than 18 and I think legally viable to vote. And in that way, if you vote for a party that has sustainability high on the agenda, because if we do not do it with our governments in Europe, it's not going to happen, or governments from the world for that matter, it's not going to happen. So that's my piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Hi, thanks for having me, Candice. My name is Tom Knevel. I don't have a background in design, so I actually started last summer with a startup with fashion as a service for menswear, because basically I had a personal challenge about a year ago, wherein I wanted to buy a new piece of clothing because I liked it, but I was also aware of the harm that I would do to the environment, and I was in sort of kind of struggle with myself. And since then, building on, okay, what can I as an individual do to help this journey that we have to take to make the fashion industry more sustainable? And I think we really need a lot of people and a lot of different people from all kind of disciplines, to make this change happen. So I'm happy to contribute wherever I can.
Yeah. Hi guys. My name is Daria. Thanks a lot, Candice, for inviting me. It's my first time, to be honest, participating in a podcast recording thing. So really exciting, especially on such a interesting topic, and I think a very pressing topic. Couldn't agree more with the previous speakers, that it's something we all need to seriously think about as citizens, as humans, as employees of any company. So my background is design. I am working as a UX designer in a marketing agency based in Eindhoven, but it's a global agency, so the headquarters is in Manchester. But yeah, there is an office in Eindhoven as well, so I came all the way from Eindhoven today. But so my personal thought on this topic is, I think it's just our duty as a human to think for the future, to think ahead, and to make very smart and sustainable choices. And in my role, I'm thinking, how can I, as a professional, as a UX designer, apply the different approaches, the different techniques in order to solve such a challenge. So today I'm willing to understand a bit deeper the challenge and the problems, the different angles from it, empathize with the world, with this issue, and see what we can do. So really curious.
Yes. So hi, thanks for having me. My name is Xavi. I'm from Spain. I'm a graphic and industrial designer, and actually I'm working as a VP of experience design. And I have been living in Spain, Germany, and Middle East. And so I always have been working, focusing human centricity and experience and what is the experience for the end user. And regarding sustainability, I think as designers, we have a big role, or we play a big role in what we have to do and what we have to define. So in the past, when we have been designing products, or the designers, they have been designing something that was not possible to reuse. Was like, okay, I create a line, this is done. And now we need to start thinking, what is the system? What is the system that applies to that product? Doesn't matter if it's digital, if it's fashion, or what it is. How is the system? What is the element? What are the elements that goes into this connection to create this product that becomes sustainable, not only as a product, but the whole system to produce this product, doesn't matter what it is. And I think when we design something, we need to start thinking about which elements are playing into this solution or this product. And by doing this, I think we could have a positive impact. We are in times that now we can use technology, we can use IT to really improve things and to improve data and how to use this data to make a major impact in the solution that we create.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. You, of course, know me, and anybody watching might know the show or the channel already. I'm Candice. I'm an experienced designer. My focus is on identity design. I think that sustainability can be very interesting for companies who want to work on their identity and who really wants to communicate with today's people, the millennials and Gen Z. And I think that sustainability and CSR can play integral roles together. But I'm not really going to talk so much today. I'm just here to present you with the challenge and to sort of, draw out your ideas and get you to work together. So, we'll start with Mike and Tom because you both have the most experience in the industry, I think, from all of us relating to this topic specifically. So if you could share your thoughts, that would be great.
Okay, well, I'll kick it off. And Tom, I'm going to bring you in once in a while, but I'll let you do your thing by yourself. Okay, so I mean, the fashion industry, just a couple of numbers just to get things straight, is the second or largest impactful industry in the world as far as sustainability is concerned in a negative aspect. And it depends who you talk to, but they produce 10% of the greenhouse gases in the world today. A challenge is that about 100 billion garments are produced a year, of which only 1% is recycled. And when we talk about the 1% of that is recycled, 60% of that is for second-hand use. The recycled products, about 30% actually never gets recycled, gets incinerated or sent to landfill after being collected for recycling. And the rest are sort of in the recycling back to fiber, which is a very small percentage of that. And there's some textile to textile. And then there's a rest that we don't really know what happens to it. However, we've all seen the photos about the piles of apparel in Africa, and that all comes via the recycling bin. So that's not something that when you throw it away in your normal rubbish container that it's going to get there. That is some customer has actually put it in a recycle bin, and yet it ends up somewhere in Africa, or the fashion company has taken their overage or the overstock or the old stock and they've sold it to somebody else, and that person has put it in a container and shipped it over to Africa and whatever is not sold there now appears in those piles. So there is no sustainability from a recycling perspective unless we change how we think about it.
Yeah.
Just a couple of other numbers talked about the lack of true recycling. Other numbers for fashion is it's the second largest user of water worldwide, responsible for 20% of the wastewater as well. And most of that wastewater is not treated. So from the perspective of pesticides getting into the environment, the fashion industry is responsible for 35% of the pesticides that get into the world environment from a pollution perspective. The other big challenge is what we hear more and more today is microplastics. And the reason why fashion has a huge play in the microplastics in the world is that 60% of the textiles we use today are fossil fuel based, and most of the textiles we wear today are actually blended. So they are not pure cotton or pure wool or pure nylon, but they are a mixture of both. And as soon as you mix plant-based with fossil fuel-based textiles, you lose the possibility today with the technology we have today to recycle efficiently and effectively. So that's so one of the things that is playing a huge role is not that we need to only look at fashion from a perspective of greenhouse gases. We've got to look at fashion from the perspective of all sides, and the donut economics is one of those where we have to look at people as well as nature, as well as the industry, and therefore we are looking for a systemic change in the fashion world in order to become recyclable, circular, and sustainable. And one of those is fashion as a service, which is something that has been brought up today. And I'll hand that over to my colleague next to me to give you a bit more information.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think you pointed out, I'm still a bit scared about the numbers that you're pointing out. Of course, I know them by now, but still afraid of it. But you're pointing out that there are a few different topics in fashion that are all polluting. So you have like the raw materials, you have like the production sides. So I think that is like something that's for the brands, like they have to use the good materials. They are able to recycle the garments when they are finished, when they are not able to be worn anymore. But you also have like the consumer, so the person that actually uses a piece of fashion. And what you see the last decades that consumers want a new trend every time. So a few decades back, we had like the winter and the summer collection, but now you have new collections every few weeks. And especially, I think younger people want the newest hype and the newest trend. And there are new trends every other week. So there is a lot of different topics in the fashion industry, like from the raw materials to production to also the transport, because you have like raw material shipping from one continent to the manufacturing plants in the other continent, etc. And then to the consumer, and then in the end go back to, as you said, to the via the containers to the landfills. But then you also have like the consumer behavior. And I think that is indeed where fashion as a service can step in. But also what we need is the change in the mind of consumers. So we need to, these kind of numbers and the situation that we're living in now, that we need to show the consumers, younger consumers, but also the older ones, of course, what is the harm and how can we change it? And I think that is a big challenge.
Yeah, I think that definitely is. I've seen a couple of debates, and there's this disparity between the haves and the have-nots, because sustainable fashion is a niche product. It is sort of more people who can afford to invest in that. I don't want to say poor, but I did watch one episode of the show where the people were less fortunate, and to them fashion is really important, especially because it gives them status. So that's one of the things that I think we will be looking on today. First off, I'd like to think of fashion as a service. So Vera, with your business processes design, I'd like you to think about how could we re-envision the business processes to make it more sustainable, the fashion businesses to make it more sustainable. And then you and Mike already said it, but I'd like you to think how we could use technology, and not only how technology can play a role in sustainable fashion, but also what it can do for society. Because, there's a lot of automation, and a lot of people are talking about using purely tech to solve the fashion problem. And that puts a lot of people out of work. So how could we make technology work for us without us losing our jobs?
So in the as a very first sort of statement that I would like to make, the whole market and all the consumers need a complete different mindset.
Yes.
Because those mountains only fill themselves if people keep buying the stuff.
Exactly.
So I would first technology super cool and will be a solution, but put a tax on the durability if you have stuff that you have to throw away in a week.
Yeah.
Put a tax on it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it more expensive.
Yeah.
So it's not that interesting to buy. But
exactly.
I'm wearing shoes that I think 10 years ago. I don't want to know how many the sneaker shoes I've already wasted at making these shoes super cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's another factor, which is like how brands are perceiving sustainability and how brands or premium brands are using sustainability as a selling point, although they don't believe on the core of sustainability. And also, I agree on the part of creating this mind shift, and it's not a mind shift, but it's not a mind shift into the organizations and into the brands, but also how social media is treating and how much impact through social media we can have into people to start making this move for this mindset. And that doesn't sound like, if you do this, you're becoming super green. But like, we need to be conscious about what we're doing and the conscious of the impact. And it's not also to share, if we talk about microplastics, etc., to see, I open a fish and I show you everything, all the plastic that is inside. It's about how we can change and how we can impact the mindset of the people by, perhaps you need to change certain things, but it's not the people or the consumer, are the brands that are producing this mass market, and how these brands try to navigate through to try to manipulate their own message, right? So you see labels that they say, it's 99% plastic recycle, and then under the label is like only 5% of it is from plastic, blah, blah. So there's many things that needs to be checked. And we need to create a cultural change with message and proper messaging, and not just using campaigning that doesn't sound real.
So I think that will be your task in this edition. And then Daria, I was thinking perhaps you could maybe deal more with the processes, and I left those notes at home. But using UX, maybe you could think of what processes you could create to bring different stakeholders along. So both the exclusive buyer, but also those who do buy a lot of fast fashion because it's cheap. So maybe think about that mentality and ideate on that. And Linda, for you, because of journey mapping, I thought it would be very nice if you could think about the journeys that the various customers take and maybe identify some points that you think we could elaborate on. Cool. All right. So is anybody ready to sort of start spewing out their ideas? Or?
Well, I want to say one thing, and it also sort of connects with what you're doing, like fashion as a service, but for now only for men, of course, it's just a startup. But I think that's the problem with fast fashion instead of sustainable fashion or whatever is recycling or upcycling or reuse, whatever you're doing. Is that if we are doing good things, we're only doing it for a small population, and it isn't that inclusive. And I think for if we are going to generate some ideas, so we need to keep that in mind as well. Because fast fashion, if you are like a really fat person, you can also buy there your stuff. And if you're a fat person and it's only like small sizes and medium sizes, then you're obligated to wear fast fashion.
I think it's, another point is we talk about Europe, America, or Western countries. But I think major impact is what happened when you go to countries like India, you go to Indonesia, you go to China, where they treat the things completely different. They have completely different perception about what is sustainable or not sustainable because it's a different culture. And if you count the amount of people who lives in Indonesia or lives in China, and if you have a 5% impact on that population, you will reduce a lot in terms of pollution, right? And how they perceive what is good or not. And that's why I was saying this mind shift, this culture change needs to start also from society perspective.
Can I just give you a bit of information on that? Because
That would be great.
people may take it that the West has less to do, whereas the West has the most to do. Whereas Western Europe, so the northern countries, so Western Europe, North America, we'll take Australia and New Zealand into the mix as well, and Japan and South Korea, are responsible for more than 80% of the greenhouse gases today. There are millions of people living in China, but if you look at the per person, their footprint is 9 times smaller than one person's footprint in America. So if I have 5% impact in China and I have 5% impact in America, I'll have much more impact if 5% in America happens rather than 5% in China. And in India, it's the same. You must understand that if we want to be in a world, we all need to use about 3 football fields of impact on the world. We'll use a football field as a measurement. America are at 15 to 18 per person. So the top 1%, you're talking about hundreds of football fields. So getting that into your mind. And then you go to China, whereas 70% of the Chinese do less than 3 football fields per person. And in India, it's 80% who do less than 3 football fields in the world. So there are billions of people. But when you look at where is it coming from, it's coming from the northern countries and not the southern countries. If you look at Africa, which at the moment is 1.3 billion people, who is where the most growth is happening from a population perspective, their total impact on greenhouse gases to date is less than 2%. The entire continent, which is bigger than North America, Europe, and China put together from a landmass perspective. So where does it need to happen? It needs to happen here, where we are today. And the other challenge you have is the people of the South need to get to a certain level, because the poor in the world, sorry, I'm preaching, so I needed to go. The poor in the world live in the South, and they are not causing it, but they are suffering the consequences of. And if you go and look at the North, then that's where it needs to happen. But we also need to allow the South to bring their standard of living up, because most of them earn less than $5,000 a year.
But Mike, is that not like a direct correlation? Okay, so first off, my OCD just wants to say that Australia, even though it's south, is part of the north.
That's what I said.
Part of the global north.
True.
So we get our cheap fashion because those people are at that level. And so, Linda, what I was having in mind for you is sort of the different steps, putting the journeys of the person from the south and the person from the north, envisioning that journey and sort of looking at the different stages that they touch on there. So,
I really want to jump into one thing that you're saying, because this is happening when this type of discussion is taking place, whereby one person, we need to change something, and the other person is going to come in and says yes, but And there's an argument that's created that has something to do with it. It's a bit farther away, and then all this data comes up, which is all true. It's always all true, but it's a confusing situation because we are living here in the Western world, in the society that we call developed, and we are talking about a living standard, and that living standard is something that we want to hold on to.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about this living standard and then this big market that we have in Africa, and but they want to have a living standard too, and they're growing, and that's an issue. If India, if China, if all those countries begin to have the ambition to live like us, we're fucked.
Well, I think
And this realization is that in this design for the world needs to be something that brings it back to the middle of the donut theory, in the middle of the ring, whereby and it should not be less, but it should be sufficient.
Yeah.
And also what I want to say before was about, not about the amount of consumption, was about the culture, how they perceive the earth, or what is for them, for an India person, or from people in Indonesia, or for, I don't know, from Egypt, what means ocean, for example. How they use ocean. Do they throw the things out to the ocean? For us, it's like, oh my gosh, this is not, right? And then on top comes all the numbers that you said, which are true. But for me, it's like how we make this. There's a culture factor that it's really complicated to change, because it's how generation and generation they have been living. And then on top comes the label of they want to be also like the Western, which is massive consumption. And then is where
I don't want to say that they want to come to the West, which is massive consumption. What I'm saying is they've got to come out of poverty.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility for that, because we have all benefited from their poverty.
Yeah.
So we have raped the global South so that the global North can be rich. That's it. But where I'm coming from is, and I understand your cultural conversation, but it is just so much a cultural conversation in the West, because nothing's changing as far as sustainability is concerned.
Yeah.
And when you start talking about sustainability from the global South, I think you'll be more surprised that there's more movement in the global South for sustainability. And I'm talking about Africa. I'm not going to talk about the East because I don't know, but I know Africa. And I can tell you there's far more happening at ground level from a sustainability perspective in Africa than there is from a ground level in the Western or the global North. However, we cannot step away. And I hear what you say. We don't want to lower our standards, because we live at this standard.
That's just the reflect.
No, I understand, but we live at this standard. However, the main issue about sustainability is consumption. And we're going to have to decrease the consumption, which means in the global North, we're going to have to decrease it more, while allowing the global South to increase theirs a bit, so that we can meet somewhere. And that is the big challenge, because it's a global issue. It's not a country issue. It's a global issue.
Yeah.
And I find that incredibly difficult to sell that concept in the world that I live in today.
Well, that's why we've got these experienced designers here. I want all the experienced designers to come up with ways that we create new types of statuses. So right now, fast fashion, for example, is one of the industries in which we have perceived status. How you dress makes people think a certain way of you. So what sort of can we create new status symbols? So, for example, this might take this in the right context, but like China's got that social score, right? So how can we make somebody score super high points and be like the coolest dude in town, right? Because that's always going to be the case. They want to be the coolest, they want to be the best. So what sort of status symbols can we design to help society step away from consuming tangible physical products and have more? We can maybe think, Mike, metaverse. sort of,
No.
how we use the tech?
No, but I think in terms of the customer journey, it's important in the orientation phase that when you say you want to be the coolest kid in town, you can also be the coolest kid in town if you make sustainable choices.
Yeah.
And that's the part of awareness that we need to create.
Yeah.
And I think that's the role as designers. You can also do like making it important and showing them that it is valuable and why it gives you credit in the real world. And that's part of the orientation phase, like creating that awareness. And I think that's also for the fashion as a service. Just try it out and see what happens in your environment where you are.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's exactly
What is
it.
always the difficult thing is that in the world of we need to work for our cash so that you have bread, and it's for you as an entrepreneur. So you're gonna do something, and somehow that thing's gonna do is using something from the world around us.
Yeah.
Giving you money, and that brings your family and your home and super happy. And then at one point you want to have more. And then you get to a dynamic where you work in a company that is responsible for a substantial part of those numbers that you were just talking about. How to minimize that sort of why is there no companies around people at the bigger companies that I am working that say, you know what, it's enough.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I
That's
think
I think
it's- it also might be like-
market. We want to make it better to put the perspective on a different axis or something.
I think it's also the easy way for the bigger companies. So they're used to doing something in far away, far east, for example, to produce it cheap. So it's the easy way of working. They're used to it, and now we need to change it. And I know in some of the bigger companies, they're trying out concepts like fashion as a service. They're trying with it, but on the smaller budgets, and it's like the innovation teams. And yeah, you might think it's only for the PR, etc. But I think all individuals trying. But I also think that you're right, so that we have to be like inclusive. So I think that's one of the challenges that, for example, the fast fashion companies, they have it perfectly in place. So they have the perfect, the marketing, the social medias, the websites, it's super easy to use and you can find whatever you want. And for the newer, like the startups, maybe as I am, but also within the bigger companies, the startups, it's difficult to change something that's so established and so makes so much money for them.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think it's you've got the different stakeholders, and that's why I think, having these journey maps, for example, and processes, business processes, and also the customer processes, all of that sort of laid out, and also identifying the key groups and designing specifically for each instance is the way to go, because you can't, you work at a company. I've had this. I brought up like, little kids are making these shoes, and then everybody's like, well, that's guilt. We don't want to feel guilt, and then they mock you because they don't want to feel guilt. But it's not that they're bad people, but nobody wants to feel guilt. It's proven. Everybody here who's in, especially UX design, studied a bit of behavioral science, how people operate. It's not always logical. It is a lot of emotion involved. So that's why I think sort of going step by step, focusing on different parts is the way forward. And that's sort of, I think it's very important to establish that the professional is not the same as the stocks holder.
Yeah.
So those who invest, put their money in Wall Street and whatever, their profits are like, the professionals we're really middle class.
Yeah.
And a lot of professionals, even the top professionals, are still middle class. So how are you going to get the middle class to stop dreaming about some superior upper class that they'll never attain and actually solve problems? And how are you going to bring the poorer or the the developing classes? How are you going to bring them along? They, like Mike said, they probably can't do as much because they're the ones who have been paying for it, so they shouldn't be paying for it anymore.
Well, it's a systemic change.
Yeah.
The whole system needs to change, and you talked about it. So the economy, so instead of measuring ourselves by how much money we have, maybe we need to measure ourselves by how happy we are.
Okay.
And if we do it that way, that's a different measurement. But you've got to get the culture to take it up, because that culture is easy to take up in your more tribal environments, because that's really how tribes used to live, in that the wellness factor or the happiness factor was what it was about, and the group rather than the individual. So that's a huge change from Western society and civilization. When capitalism came in 500 years ago, that's when this thing started going the wrong way. And now we've got to bring it back, and we've got to bring it back within 8 years, which realistically is, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at what processes need to happen, et cetera, I think the big challenge is if we can get everyone just to take one small step in the direction of doing something sustainable, any company, every person, just doing one thing, we will start seeing that maybe it's not as bad as everyone thinks it is. And actually, we may actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we should bring it around. From a design perspective, there are a lot of things that will happen. But we need the governments of the world to help us, because big business is not going to do it out of their hearts, because they are still driven by KPIs of profit. If we change the system, and systemically we tell big companies, you're no longer going to be measured on how much money or profit you make, you're going to be measured on how you improve the environment that you're in, then we will see things changing. And I know that's a utopia, but that's really where you need to go to. And we all play a role in that. So if we all personally today make a personal step to do something, then it's at least doing it. So I personally come from South Africa. I ate meat, red meat, 7 days a week. So I have a carbon footprint, which I can tell you is the biggest of all of you sitting here. In fact, I might have a carbon footprint that's bigger than all of you together. I'm just talking about me, yeah? So personally, I now eat red meat 3 days a week, and the rest I eat fish, white meat, and I have days where I have no meat. And that impact on my carbon footprint is 30%. I don't change my clothes every season. I don't change my clothes every year. I'm wearing jeans that are 10 years old. They've been repaired 6 times. Just doing that, that's another 10 or 20% out of my footprint. That's how big your food and clothing impact is on the world today. If we all wore our clothes twice or 3 times longer, and we all 1 day a year for the next 7 years stopped eating meat, in 7 years' time, the impact will be humongous. And that's us in the Western world. And I'm not decreasing my standard of living. I am changing how I interact with the world. And I need to change how I interact with the world by going to things that are sustainable. And sustainability from a food perspective is plant-based, because the calories moving from the crop, the soya that feeds the cow that feeds you, I can feed 30 people with the plant-based that I'm feeding the cow, where I can only feed 1 person with the cow. Those are the impacts that we need to look at, because they are huge. The rest will happen. Why? Because the moment you start voting with your wallet and start eating less meat, the meat industry will decrease by nature of the market that we live in today. If there's less demand, there's going to be less of it. Its impact is going to be less. Fast fashion is the same.
I just had a very bad memory from early 2000s. Big reports, headlines. Britain had to kill like 50,000 cows because there wasn't enough people buying meat at that time. So I think our challenge as designers is really to work on that behavioral science, UX. We really think, how are people behaving? How are we going to change them? We use some journey maps, some business processes at every step. What small things can we do to design better processes, to help people make incremental changes? Because the system has to change. But if you just try and change it at once, you're going to fail. We have this thing where we go anti-capitalism or pro-capitalism and socialism and communism. And then we want to design new isms. Instead, we can just optimize what we have, strip away the sort of associations, the mental models we have, where it's like, oh, well, this one sounds communist. Now I hate everything they say. So how can we help people become more open-minded? How can we help people become more educated? And how can we give people status without tangible stuff?
Yeah, I want to just also maybe ask a question to all of you, especially those people who mentioned the word system. It's been mentioned multiple times by several of you, because it is a system, you're saying. There are a lot of perspectives involved. It's a big brands, it's the consumers, it's the government, etc., etc. So who else is in that system? Can we identify those perspectives in the system? And if we're saying that the consumers is the biggest chunk of that system that needs to be talked to and communicated with, then how do we approach the people? What kind of perception they have of sustainability and in general lifestyle, clothing?
I think that's there you have. So if you design something so that as many people as possible will buy it, you're playing into the segments. You're using knowledge that you have so that you're kind of manipulating people, which is okay if that's your mission as a designer. But in this case, we're not trying to manipulate people into anything. We're trying to
understand, okay, there are so many of us and we are so different. So how do you make sustainable fashion accessible and understood?
How can you make all those people wear their clothes 1 year longer?
Exactly. So what are the reasons why they don't do that?
Because of the media that tells people about you have to buy something new tomorrow, and otherwise you don't go wrong.
And they make it very accessible, right?
Yeah.
So it's very easy to go to the city and buy something for 20 euros.
You look at it, my gaze tracking already said, you clicked on it, and then I have my...
I was thinking, you started the question about the systematic approach. And while I was also hearing all of you, systematic means, tackling this problem on all these levels. And I, to be honest, don't see the biggest problem probably in the consumers, because they, I would rephrase it. I wouldn't put all the burden on the consumers, because basically we have brands, we have big companies, and we have two forces. We have consumers and we have on top government. And this middle, let's say these companies, they actually react on changes in these two, let's say input and output, I don't know, these two forces. So if you want this change, so we, I think, have to work basically with three of them, and behavior should be changed in the consumer's perspective. Government has to also play a really big role in that, and the companies will adjust, and then again the designers will play a role in the companies, because if they will have to change the behavior, they will come to a solution, like they will seek a solution, and we as designers will be there again to create sustainable processes, to promote the sustainable life. So it's never just one-sided, because we're so talking a lot about consumers, but it's just, again, people also following just what was told by these brands, what is told to the government. And if government allows to sell the clothes that can just last one day, as you just said, if it's just cannot create the system when sustainability is just blooming, right? To create, for example, the meat, you go to the supermarket. There are three usually levels of eco brands. So there is no label. We have 1 star, 2 stars, and 3 stars. And I think that the majority of people cannot afford to buy these free stars, but what these free stars mean in the Netherlands, at least I can mistake. But this is not only that it's clean, like it's not, there's no, I don't know, pesticides or something, but it's also the animal itself was treated respectably. So
it's better life.
yeah, for
It's
example,
a
the
good life.
kitchen, or not the kitchen, the chicken lives not in just 50 to 50 centimeters box, but it's more like have a better life. Like, so it's one thing. I also wanted to say, yeah, I have so many thoughts. It's also about, of course, is to speak about the companies. Of course, it's about the processes. You cannot. They cannot just, if you come to them and say, okay guys, be please sustainable, they will not do it in just one day, because they, even how they, like the whole system is just one way to use the raw materials to sell it to someone else. And if we speak about the recycling, reuse, recycling, and I forgot another term when you have
the
to,
reuse.
like I've been like made clothes upcycling. Yeah, it's not fit into the system at all. So it's maybe sometimes the side projects, but then you have to really include and like to change really like the whole system to make it work. And also it's related. It's also a lot of problems lies in localization, because you cannot create these recycle processes without participating and being like handy with local government, with local companies. Sorry, I'm just this cacao. It just creates some kind of I have to always just follow a little bit.
You jump
So,
back in the colder floor. And Mike, and then Tom we have, everybody will have. Yes, and remember to press record, please.
I can't yet.
Vera, you said
Oh,
some
yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting things, which is a pity. I hope that that
Maybe
camera has got the good sound for all of it.
Especially a local government. I mean, these
Yeah,
are my
so
questions. Who are these different parties involved besides
The question
the
is
typical consumer?
how much impact the government has and how much the people of society listen government.
Oh,
Depends on the country. I think it's
I think it's a country.
And I think, of course, it can be a lot of campaigns, and then government can put taxes into the brands, etc. But the question is like, when you go into the brands and what the brands they try to sell to the consumer, which at the end consumer would be like kind of a victim, right? So they convince me to buy something, and then, but what is the impact of these brands to change this mindset, and how these brands they can collaborate with governments? And then the other question is, why some of these sustainable brands, or they have this level of sustainable, are more expensive, and what is the value that it values? So it's like, because they have less impact into the world, and then they are better, then only upper class they can buy these clothes. And this is kind of how is a mix. It's just a question that I have when I see it.
Yeah, I think there are a few things there. So if you look at pricing of garments, so if you look at let's say a sweater from a sustainable brand, let's say it's 100 euros, and from fast fashion it's like 20 euros.
Yeah.
Why is it different? I don't know the exact ones, but at least what I know one is that fast fashion has been reducing quality of clothing because they know people only use it for 2 weeks, so they don't need good quality clothing, while the sustainable brand has more, so they need more raw materials to make it last longer. Besides, and of course you have like the more sustainable source raw materials, hopefully better working conditions, etc., etc. But for me personally, the biggest thing is quality of the clothing, because that makes higher quality makes it last longer, and I want that a piece of clothing lasts longer.
Interestingly, though, I read about this. I think it was in the 90s. So in the 90s, a lot of clothes were created locally, sourced and created locally, and then companies started using China and India because of it being cheaper. So they reduced their cost by a lot.
Otherwise, maybe the sound goes.
Oh yes, they reduced their cost by a lot, So their profits shot up. So the thing is, you know, and also they have multiple shares. So if you think of lots of shareholders having to get profit, then that's already a problem. So if you're a small company and you don't have as many people to financially reward, you could still profit, right? So I think that's an interesting thing, is how do we sort of help small businesses grow? Tom being here is a perfect example for all of us. So Tom gives us some challenges that he faces, and perhaps we can do a second session in a month or so. We can keep communication with Tom. We come back, we ideate, because we're running out of time, and I think I haven't heard a lot from Daria, I haven't heard a lot from Linda or Vera, a little bit from Jeroen, but I'd like to hear more about design, the role of design. After all, this is the role of design. So how are we going to tackle this? How are we creatives, innovators and designers going to tackle this to make it more realistic?
And to pick the part of one more of the system. So because in the system, I think we mentioned just government, company, and then consumer. But then there's this chunk of how brands produce, which you have a massive system inside, right? And what is the logistic inside? What is the type of production that they have? What is the kind of technology that they use? What are the infrastructures? And then how this can be simplified, centralized, or whatever, to reduce the footprint, about how much it costs in terms of footprint that, I don't know, producing a pullover. And I think it's part of the experience. What is the experience, not for the end user, but what is the experience for the company to produce these clothes?
I want to say one thing before I'm going to try to shut up for a while.
Yeah.
One of the things with Internet of Things and the challenges that it's facing in the current state of development is something that might also be an inspiration for this process. It needs standardization. There's these huge companies investing loads of money in their own iPhone wire, and they're protecting their own iPhone wire, because if other people start to use their iPhone wire, they sell more iPhone wires. What the governments need to do in a lot of different layers in these sort of experiences, where it goes from the sensors that measuring the pollution in a river, and when there's pollution, something needs to start blinking and somebody needs to go there. But that's a standard. The river cannot be more polluted than it is. So that's something that I would also be interested in to sort of evaluate, if you see the whole process of every step that a piece of clothing goes through. Where are the parts of standardization that go outside of a brand? And I'm doubting that if there are many.
I think maybe also to add on that, because also for the systems, like the traditional system, it goes from brand to retailer to consumer, and then it ends, right? So then the companies or government, they don't know what happens with a piece. It ends in your wardrobe, it ends in your, I don't know, wherever, and in the end you threw it away or give it away, and maybe you don't know where it ends. So I know there's also like startups, they are having like at the supermarket, they retrieve clothing and they don't bring it to Africa or something, but they bring it back to recycling things. Because we need the consumer, we don't need that the road ends at the consumer, we need the road to continue, but the consumer is responsible for that, because he or she is the one that owns at that moment the piece of clothing.
We already, government, like with aluminium or copper, for example, if you take it to a certain place, they compensate you for it. And plastic as well, you can go to the supermarket here in the Netherlands, you put your bottles, you get money back. So I think that could be an interesting angle. How can we get governments to say, okay, well, you know, thank you for bringing the fabric to us. And then also for these governments, if you want to maybe, the idea that I have, that I really want us to work on or think about, is I thought of using your business. So we've got fashion as a service. Now, your main concern is of course the people who use your service. However, we could extend it. You could apply to the gemeente and say to them, okay, well, how can we eradicate poverty? So when some materials, some clothing are near their end life, you can send it to certain people and they can mend it or upcycle it and sell it maybe back to you. So, that whole, I think we have to design a system that is not only business customer, but business government, business.
But it exists. Actually,
Oh yeah?
the European Green Deal is the start. And the technology today is RFID and NFC. So from that perspective, we exist today. In fact, the technology's been here for 30 years, but we're only starting to use it today. The challenge is what do we do with the reverse logistics, which is from the customer back into the cycle, so we can get to circular. And European Green Deal is based on three things that are being looked at today. That is batteries, electronics, and textile, which is textile is the fashion industry. And what they're saying is that eventually the producer of the end article has a responsibility after the customer has used it. So what is the reverse side or the recycle, upcycle side of it? However, how do you track and trace it? Because as you've all said, if I don't know what's happening to it, how can I manage it? So RFID and NFC are there to do that. The challenge is it costs. So in the global north, we'll be able to do it without too much challenges, but in the global south, that's going to be a challenge. However, technology is getting cheaper and cheaper, and the IoT of the world is actually getting to a stage where you're looking at cents rather than dollars. However, the Green Deal from the European Union goes into effect in 2024. However, it's got no teeth, meaning to say there's not a penalty large enough to force your brand to actually do it.
Yeah.
The only two countries that force a brand to pay something at the moment is France and the Netherlands. But it is such a small impact, companies actually prefer to pay it because it's cheaper.
I remember when I lived in Portugal, I had a friend who was working at a very large fashion company as well. And this is 2011. They actually destroyed their garments so that they could claim tax back.
Yeah.
So everything that they didn't sell, the government paid them to destroy it. So that's quite a very
but that's
quite an interesting
so
concept.
so it's there. We just need to influence not only the customer but also the companies, and that's where I come back to, if the European Green Deal can actually get teeth, it will actually force so that you in your environment will have easier steps to get to understand what's going on with the products and where it's going, and there'll be easier ways to manage the environment from the brand's perspective to say, hey guys, you actually have a responsibility but you're not living up to it, so we're going to do something about it. And it's available today. However, it requires everyone's input into it, and unfortunately today the European Commission hasn't yet put enough dynamite in it to blow it up, because that's really what we need to happen.
Does anybody have sort of ideas how we could bring people along to sort of change their mindset a little bit?
I think it's part of awareness, right?
Yeah.
So creating awareness when you go to a retail store, and now we can use technology to show what is the production chain of your clothes, and imagine that you go to a store and then when you tag or you pass your phone and then it's showing what is the footprint of it, or what was the impact before and what is the positive impact of now by using that piece of clothes, or by using, let's say, blockchain or another type of technology, what had been the process in the past, and by buying there, what is the positive impact? You can focus on oceans, because ocean is a big topic, and we have been treating the ocean in the last centuries, and how's just create a visualization from a design perspective that people can perceive this message in an easy way instead of reading an article. That could be good, right? So you step inside the shop, you can play, you have part of gamification, you create awareness of your brand, but at the same you have awareness of the impact of the clothes that you're buying. So that could be perhaps a quick one.
It's called a digital product passport.
Yeah, exactly.
I would like to have more honor or more focus on the people that repair clothes.
Yeah.
So look, this got fixed by blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
That we are buying clothes with holes in it is
Yeah.
something that I find amazing. And whenever somebody shows off their holes in their clothes, then I always show mine. There's a homemade, which is always an amazing conversation that I don't understand why you would buy that.
Yeah.
It's funny because when you mentioned how to make this one interesting, I know already one project that she was graduating with me the same year, and she created actually a business out of it.
Oh, nice.
So she kind of researched all the ways how you can repair the clothes, but but for example, she was focusing on the holes.
Mm-hmm.
So she created different ways how you can cover it in a more fashionable
Nice,
way. Like even if you have that kind of sweater, the hole, so it now looks so beautiful that even it's create more value than it was like just this. So yeah, that kind of ideas, of course, already they exist, and if we can bring it like more power or enforce it, then it would be.
Yeah.
I think
Why do
Brands
people
that
do not
connect
repair
with that,
clothes?
that's
because
really-
Or why
fast
do-
fashion is
why do-
cheap and it breaks its limited weight. So planned obsolescence, it's something that many designers do on purpose. It's, planned obsolescence. So how do we make more durable products that can stand the test of time? So if you get a hole, you can just fix it. But in many times you don't get a hole, you get a whole seam gone, and the whole fabric falls apart.
Well, I mean, the t-shirts that last 20 washes and then disintegrate, those are the things that you need to get rid of, because there's no way it's going to become sustainable.
That's why you shouldn't just lay every responsibility on the company that sells the clothing. It's also on the companies that are able to repair it, but also washing instructions instead of constantly washing your clothes, like spraying
Taxes,
something
people.
or
Taxes.
hanging it out in the air to
That's
just
how we think it works.
breathe. It's more on all those things that are involved with your clothes to just go to waste. It isn't only the buying process; it's the process itself, that everything comes with it. And now we're constantly saying things like sending the clothing away, but when you focus on it in the buying part, like giving you some information to your buyer when they are buying the clothing, if it goes, if you have a hole, you can do this, or just sending extra materials like we do with buttons. Why aren't we doing things like that when you are buying it?
Yeah.
And that's the responsibility of the company as well.
And also, like, people know they can return clothing. There is this, at least in the Netherlands, the blue or the yellow bakjes, where you can put all the clothing and you just put it in. And my assumption is like whoever does this is kind of putting his guilt away. Like, that's it, I did a good job, I'm good, without realizing that there might be piles of clothing ending up in Africa, etc., etc. So their journey stops there at the blue buck. That's it.
But the problem is that there's so much fast fashion, it cannot be recycled. So even if you want to recycle it, you can't, because it's such bad quality.
Yeah.
So that, I mean,
Yeah, but so it feels to me almost like that there's a market. If you explain like that, there's a market created which is a little bit like heroin, and there's a bunch of companies that is addicted to it, and they just have to cut off because you can't make clothes that break down after a week. It's
no,
just not
I
okay.
agree. But is there a future for fast fashion? And the answer is no.
And
Is there a
why-
future for fashion? The answer is yes.
Definitely yes.
If it is sustainable and to a large extent circular. So that's really,
Yeah, and circular doesn't only mean recycling. All right. So what I love doing, I love upcycling things. So Mike and I and Daria, we all worked at Foot Locker, and I remember it was one of our private labels. They used to get products. So this was prints that on the t-shirts, and then they just get a piece of fabric with the print. And they were going to toss out 3 big bags of these fabrics with all these prints. I was like, no! I took it and I made little pillows out of it. And everybody I knew wanted some of these pillows. you just make little scatter cushions. So you can't recycle it, you can't sell it because it's just a piece of fabric, but you can upcycle. And a lot of people like crafting.
Yeah.
A lot of people like being creative. And what I've noticed, I've lived with poor people and I've lived with very, very rich people. And I've noticed that poor people, they use creativity to pass their days. They don't have the internet the whole day. In places like South Africa, you pay every megabyte you use. So you could use the raw material, you could use the throwaways as raw materials for them to upcycle. That's why I think it's important to sort of have government in mind. Government seeks to eliminate poverty. They can use these products, the throwaways, and upcycle. Create some programs. We can design certain programs, create like a website. People go there, they learn how to upcycle certain fabrics and make teddy bears, handbags. We can make those, what's it called with the patched bed sheets?
Patchwork.
Patchwork?
Yeah.
Patchwork bedding or whatever, curtains.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that we can upcycle. It doesn't necessarily have to be recycling.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of nice, very good initiatives already running
Yeah.
through things like this. There are designers, they make beautiful art, I would say. And also people that know that it exists, they're really into it. They're like, whoa, this is nice, I'm going to step away from the traditional things. For me, it's like the biggest challenge might be in the mess. So you have like maybe 10% of the people who is into it, maybe other 10% uses jeans for 10 years, but then there's still 80% that's not aware of what's there.
How to make fast upcycling rather than fast fashion.
So how to
Fast
take
recycling.
It's funny because during my studies I was quite involved in all the, as an industrial designer, involved in all this upcycling thing, and it was kind of a movement where there's a studio in Barcelona where they collect garbage kind of, and then they transform it into products. And then I was through this channel, I was part of a 48 hours workshop in Poland where they have a huge room full of trash, and then you need to pick the elements and then transform it into a product and then to give it a second life to it. And through this channel then came to the part we're talking today about the clothing, where the Catalan government had a pile of uniforms from the people who clean the streets. Pile of tons of it. They didn't know what to do, they used to burn it. So they contacted us and we tried to find a way to create an art cycle of it. So we transformed these uniforms into different products. We create products for schools, we create bags and stuff like this that then they have been sold. And the system that we create, the people who have been tailoring these backpacks, uniforms for kids, to playing in the kindergarten, etc., was people from the jail. So and then you create a whole cycle, and everything that was sold, the benefits from this sold was directly to the people who are in the jail or to support initiatives. And that was a way to recycle uniforms, because that's another topic. What happened with the uniforms that governments are using? And that goes together with how governments can help to create this change and to make this change.
I think what's really interesting is also we were talking about changing the mentality of the person. So most of the educated, well-off people that I know recycle. They want to do their part. They want to be developed people. They don't want to be umbalumpas or So I think that time and time again, what information pops or what I saw over and over again is that people who are less connected, have less finance, they really struggle with sustainability. They find it elitist or exclusive because, of course, only certain people can afford the very expensive upcycled or recycled sustainable products. So I think that sort of helps them come along as well, right?
But that's also why you need to make second-hand wear really accessible, especially for the poor people. Because now the fast fashion is accessible. Well, if you make the second-hand fashion accessible, then the poor people can use that as well. And then it isn't for the elite or the hip people over there.
Yeah.
And basically that's what you see in as a service, right? So that's what you
Yeah.
saw with mobility. People can't afford a car, but now they can use a
Exactly.
car for a day, for example. So with as a service, also fashion as a service, you bring the expensive, sustainable option affordable by paying per use instead of ownership.
All right. I think.
And I think
that's
also
good.
we should not be talking about poor people if you don't want fashion, but the people that don't want or can spend the money.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because I don't want to spend the money that other people spend on it. I would be very interesting. Is this a service that I could say I give you 100 euros per month and you make me look okay?
I like about
It's like Netflix,
That's a very important
Yeah.
point. That's something that I also wanted to bring up, but we are.
And I have one
time.
question, just one, because I think I'm
I
gonna
always
take
have
this.
those questions at the
I'll
last
take
moment.
this thought and this question offline and back home. Like maybe we can brainstorm later after
Yeah.
offline, whatever, where clothing materials can actually be used, because you said they make products. So where can these excess of materials that is in a pile can be reused rather than just in clothing, again upcycling into another
They use the
clothing
automotive
piece.
industry as insulation.
Yeah, so you said pillows and maybe other products. So you know there are a lot of like second life products that can be born out of these
Yeah.
raw materials, not raw materials, but the old.